we have perhaps one, perhaps two presenters. I'm not sure. We'll soon find out. Bob and Roxanne Andersen have quite a story to tell together and separately. We'll find out what happens this evening. I believe the title is 3 in 1. 3 in 1. Please welcome Bob and perhaps Roxanne Andersen.
Thank you. I will be doing most of the speaking today. Maybe Roxanne will interject something. 25 years ago, Roxanne and I had been married for 25 years. We thought we had a good marriage, and we decided to engage in a marriage ministry. So we started working, learning some of the theories and reading some of the books, going to some of the lectures. We weren't counselors, or at least marriage counselors by profession, but we learned a lot. And then we decided we wanted to speak. So we went to some of the professional speakers bureaus, and it was recommended to us to write a book for credibility. And one of the ideas we picked up along the way is marriage is like dance. How do two very different people move together as one? You have to do that in dance, and that's a pretty good analogy on what you can learn in order to make marriage work well, because there are some hiccups in marriage that don't necessarily go well because two different people can pull two different directions. So finally, we got around to writing the book. The book is entitled The Marriage Dance, and that got out about 10 years ago, and that we were the marketers. So we would go out and speak, and we would sell the book because we were speaking on the subject of marriage. And part of the issues that were in the book were embrace your differences. You've got to talk about that because you're talking about two different people moving together as one. How do you do that? Well, one of the ways you have to do it is you have to embrace those differences. And then there is, how do you lead in dance and how do you follow in dance? Because in dance, you don't have any verbal communication whatsoever. All of the communication comes in the form of touching between the arms and the body. So the communication has to be very clear, especially when you're not using any words. So we knew that there were 100 people that had 100 books on marriage. So we were not trying to be the first one, the experts on marriage. We were trying to come across with a new perspective, look at it like you would look at a dance, and see how two very different people could move together as one. Well, the first book was that book, and we sold it, but some of the people wanted to like the book and decided they wanted to work through the book. And since it had already been written, Roxanne took that book and turned it into a workbook. So one of the funny things that happened at that time was we were both writing a book. So far, I think everybody here tonight has written their book all by themselves. I would recommend doing that again if you have to write another book, because writing a book with two people is very difficult. Roxanne joked for quite some time. The next book she was going to write was What I Learned About Marriage by Writing a Book About Marriage, because you have two very different people trying to incorporate different ideas and have them blend together. So that kind of furthered the analogy. But she took the material that was already on there and did a workbook on it. So it looks like the exact same book, but it's a workbook that works through the various issues that we have in the Marriage Dance book. And so they could read the book, but if they wanted to work through it in order so that they can get freedom in their own marriage, they had questions and answers to go through to actually work out how they could have a better marriage. So while we were doing this, I hate to disappoint Dr. Michael Alexander, but I happen to be an attorney, and The next book we wrote was How Do You Resolve Disputes in Marriage? How do you resolve conflicts in your marriage? So I'm a professional at conflict. How do you resolve it? So we wrote something designed for marriages, and this one was a very small book. It's just kind of like 5 steps. What do you do in order to resolve conflict? And the way we wrote it is we had a blog post of 5 points, one a week. And then after 5 weeks, you could just put the book together, and it was very easy to publish because it was already done. You've already got 5 blog posts, and you don't have to write 73,000 words in a book. It's a very small book, and we use this as a giveaway so that people who are having trouble in their marriage could have some ideas on how to resolve conflict in marriage. On a completely different subject, I was complaining to Roxanne for years about I had this idea. I don't know how much you know about Christian theology, but we are both happen to be Christians, and I have a very strong opinion on who wrote the book of Hebrews. Most of you may not know that this is an issue out there, but if you're a Christian, you've probably know that the 27 books of the New Testament, we know who wrote 26 of them. We don't know who wrote Hebrews. And I had opinion, and I was complaining for quite a while, and finally Roxanne said, Bob, you got to write this up. So my 4th book is on a completely different subject, far longer than the other 2 books. Who wrote the book of Hebrews? The case for Silas and its message for today. And in this one, I take a lawyer's position. I am advocating the position. I am not trying to teach. I am advocating. And my legal background helps me to argue the case. Now, I don't know how much you know about this issue, but this is a 1900-year-old issue that has not been solved yet, and I think I had an idea. So as marriage is like one book on numerous issues, among numerous books, and we have a perspective, here is a very small directed issue, and I have kind of the only book on the subject out there on that Silas wrote Hebrews instead of Paul or Apollos. So that's kind of our story and how we went about it. And you can do multiple things in multiple ways and use your skill as a writer doing various things and help in different ways. Madam Toastmaster.